Mark Johnson and Ashley Johnson have always looked like the perfect couple in the eyes of others. They settled in a quiet suburb of Seattle, away from the noise of the big city. Their two-story house with a white fence and a manicured lawn looked like a picture from the cover of a magazine about a happy family life. Mark was 35 years old and worked for a large IT company doing software development. Ashley, 2 years younger, worked in an architectural office and had a reputation as a very capable specialist, ready to take on the most difficult projects. Friends and acquaintances said, "You are the best couple we know. Everything about you is just wonderful." And indeed, from the outside it seemed that their relationship was harmonious. They had been married for 10 years, and all these years were perceived by them as a continuous celebration of life, filled with joint travel, pleasant family dinners, and friendly gatherings. But lately something has begun to change, imperceptibly, gradually. The colors of the family idol seemed to begin to fade. Mark noticed that Ashley was coming home later and later. She said that the busy season at work had begun, clients were demanding urgent preparation of drawings, and every hour counted. At first, Mark believed her unconditionally, because in the past she had already experienced periods of rush work in the office, and they both understood that in large architectural firms, sometimes you have to stay late and work at night. However, now this has begun to happen almost daily. At first, Mark tried not to attach much importance to this. He himself stayed late at work when necessary. But something in Ashley's behavior began to bother him. Perhaps her mysterious smile when she was leaning over the phone, literally disconnecting from the real world. One day, he tried to joke. "Listen, Ash, are you corresponding with some famous architect? Admit it, maybe Frank Lloyd Wright has risen from the dead and started giving you advice." "What? Oh no. The client just wrote here, we are discussing the details of the project." She spoke absent-mindedly, without taking her eyes off the screen. She had a strange half-smile on her face, such that Mark felt uneasy. It seemed like nothing terrible was happening, but a vague feeling crept in that Ashley was not telling her something important. Once upon a time, their house was filled with conversations and laughter. They discussed everything in the world, from plans for the weekend to global events. But now in the evenings there was often tense silence in the living room. Mark sat on the couch, staring at the TV, and Ashley was constantly scrolling through something on her phone or going to her room, saying that she needed to finalize the drawings immediately. The times were still fresh in his memory when, having finished all their work, they had a joint movie night, cuddling under a blanket and generously flavoring the viewing with their favorite snacks. But it seemed like it was left in another life, quite recently, but as if it was already very far away. "Everything is fine, just a busy period," Mark repeated to himself and partly believed it. But at the same time, anxiety smoldered inside. It seemed that, under the outer shell of a prosperous family life, a breakdown was brewing. One evening, when Ashley was late as usual, Mark was forced to cook dinner himself. He chopped vegetables for a salad, stirred chicken fillet in a frying pan, and thought about how more and more often he found himself alone at home. A dull irritation arose inside him. "Why does she always have to be somewhere else?" he thought, peering into the darkened sky outside the window. When Ashley arrived, it was already about 10 in the evening. She looked tired, but at the same time her eyes were shining, and Mark noticed this contradiction. "How are you? Rough day." "Yes, I'm exhausted. Sorry it's so late, it's just—" "Well, it was a very complicated layout. We're almost done, just a little bit left. I hope you weren't too hungry." She sat down at the table, but hardly touched the food. They sat in silence for a couple of minutes, and Mark tried to collect his thoughts. He wanted to ask why she looked so animated when she said she was tired, but he remained silent. Instead, he gave the usual courtesy and put the plate in the sink. Later that night, when they were both in bed, Mark felt that his wife was no longer seeking touch as she had been before. Previously, if one of them could not sleep, the second would immediately hug him and whisper something comforting. Now Ashley seemed to be miles away from him, although she was physically nearby. He noticed that she had her back turned to him and appeared to be texting someone on her phone. When he tried to ask what happened, she only answered through a yawn. Nothing. I just want to finish reading something for work. Go to bed, please. We both have to get up early tomorrow. Mark felt a pain inside. For work, he wondered if there really were clients there who could write to her at 2 in the morning. This already seemed strange. Over the next few days, his suspicions only grew stronger. He noticed that in Ashley's car, their shared Tesla, there were some receipts for parking in places where her office was not located at all. That is, she clearly went somewhere on business not related to the office. And he also once saw her holding a new phone in her hands, not the one she usually used. But she quickly hid it in her purse, as if she didn't want Mark to have time to make out the details. New disturbing details emerged. Ashley began to lock herself in the bathroom more often, taking her phone with her. Sometimes, when she returned, Mark managed to see her deleting some messages. She did it with lightning speed, as if she had been accustomed to it for a long time. Everything indicated that she had some kind of hidden correspondence, but why? With whom? The questions that were swirling around in Mark's head haunted him, but he didn't want to make a scene out of nowhere, or at least in a place that so far seemed empty to him. It was unbearable for him to think that his sweet, kind, so familiar and close Ashley could lead a double life. Eventually, Mark's anxiety and suspicion reached a point where he could no longer bear the ambiguity of the situation. This happened on Saturday morning. Ashley got up earlier than usual and, saying that she had to run to work, tried to leave the house before breakfast. Mark, unable to bear it, caught up with her in the corridor at the front door. "Wait, can you explain what's going on?" Ashley turns around, feigning amazement. "What's happening? Mark, what are you talking about? You have become very distant. I'm trying to understand why. I know you may be overwhelmed at work, but still, this is already crossing the boundaries of normal. You're different. Maybe you can tell me?" She looked at him with a look in which resentment and some kind of restrained anger were mixed. "So I became different, right? Maybe you're just paranoid, Mark. When a person works a lot, it does not mean that he is hiding something. I understand you don't like it, but we are adults now. I don't have to report every minute where I am and what I'm doing." "I'm not saying you have to report every minute. It's just, I feel like a wall has grown between us. We don't talk, you're always on the phone, always busy, as if I have someone on my side. Seriously, do you think I'm cheating on you? This is funny." She raised her hand, trying to stop the flow of his words with a gesture, but Mark noticed that her fingers were trembling. "I didn't say it directly, but apparently you yourself made this conclusion, so you have reason to suspect that I might think so." "Oh, Mark, I don't want to discuss this now. I have no strength. I didn't sleep almost all night. We don't have enough people in our bureau. I'm doing double the workload. I need to go. Sorry." She left, slamming the door loudly. Mark remained in the corridor, pressing his back against the wall, trying to calm his racing heart. Ashley's verbal attack carried a sting of resentment in the air. He understood less and less what was happening. The conversation he had hoped for did not give him answers, but only added to his suspicions. The hysterical tone with which Ashley defended herself suggested that he did not imagine that something had gone wrong in their family. "She accuses me of being paranoid, but she trembles and leaves without finishing the conversation," Mark thought as he went up to the bedroom. He sat down wearily on the edge of the bed, not knowing whether to continue insisting or for now it was better to pretend that he believed her. But he understood that this could not continue. Sooner or later, everything will become clear. The only question is what truth he can find out. One night, when Mark was almost falling asleep, he noticed that Ashley had taken a small envelope with her to bed, which he had not seen with her before. She tried to pretend that she was reading some kind of business presentation on her laptop, but from time to time she glanced sideways at this envelope. When she saw that Mark had slightly opened his eyes, she quickly put him aside. In the morning she went to work, leaving the envelope on the table in the living room, apparently forgetting to put it away in her haste. Mark approached and saw that it was not exactly an envelope, but rather an advertising booklet with a bank plastic card attached. Moreover, apparently, the card was activated. He noticed that it was partially removed from the holder, as if it had already been used. Later in the day, he decided to check their joint bank accounts. To his surprise, the statements showed no transactions on this new card, but he did find several mysterious transfers from his joint account with Ashley. Small amounts, but repeated with enviable regularity and spent on unknown details. Why did she need to secretly transfer money, he thought. Perhaps she is saving for something secret from him. Or maybe she's withdrawing cash. This thought stuck in his head, giving him no rest. He imagined different possibilities. Maybe Ashley had debt problems that she didn't want to talk about. Maybe a loan to someone, but why secretly? The most logical explanation, which he was afraid of, was that she could maintain a rented apartment or help financially someone she cared about. A day later, when Ashley went shopping, he checked the trash can in their garage. It seemed shameful to him, as if he was playing the role of a secret spy. But what to do if he was thirsty for the truth? So he found a crumpled receipt from a hotel located at the other end of the city. The date that was on the check coincided with the evening when Ashley said she sat up all night drawing drawings in the office. In the payment column, there was the name of that new card. This check became the first real evidence for Mark. Now the suspicions have taken on concrete form, and at the thought of this, everything inside him went cold. Ashley was at the hotel, but with whom? He didn't want to believe that his wife cheated on him. Until recently, I tried to convince myself that other explanations were possible. What if there was corporate training taking place there? However, for corporate events, a different hotel chain was used, and the manager of the bureau would probably have warned about all the expenses of the service. However, Mark understood. No matter how much he looked for excuses, the truth was unlikely to turn out to be innocent. He didn't want to cause an immediate scandal because he was afraid of hearing his worst fears confirmed. Instead, he decided he needed to tread carefully, and he turned to the services of a private detective. This was an unusual step for him, but he felt that his own strength was no longer enough. Mark left the house early in the morning when the sun was just beginning to cautiously break through the dense gray clouds. He had a meeting with a private detective whom he hired to clarify the circumstances of Ashley's strange behavior. Until this moment, Mark was still hoping that perhaps he was mistaken. Yes, he'd already seen a few red flags. Ashley's new bank card, the disappearing messages on her phone, the tension in her voice when he asked direct questions. But Mark, despite his anxiety, left himself a small fraction of hope that all this suspicion was the result of his own suspicions. He hoped that the detective would not have any serious evidence, and that everything would turn out to be just a chain of misunderstandings. His car, a dark blue sedan, purred quietly at traffic lights. The city had not yet fully woken up. There were not many cars on the roads. Mark found himself mechanically peering into the faces of the drivers, as if expecting to find a clue or some sympathy there. The lacy shadows of the trees slid across the windshield as he turned toward the office where his meeting awaited him. The heart beat heavily and surprisingly evenly. The day before, Mark had hardly slept. He tossed and turned in bed, thinking about how best to behave in a conversation. I planned to question the detective thoroughly, but I was afraid that I might slip up and miss the details. The detective's office was located in a nondescript brick building on the second floor, next to a candy store and an old vinyl record store. Of all the places in the world, it was here that the fateful issues for Mark were to be decided. He walked up the creaky stairs, inhaling the smell of freshly ground coffee and pastries that rose from the pastry shop below. For a moment, he wanted to sneak away, pretend that this was all fake, buy a croissant, and just continue living his previous quiet life. But a premonition was already itching in my chest. There was no turning back. He was met in the reception area by an elderly secretary who nodded towards the heavy wooden door on the left. Mark opened it and saw the detective, a short man of about 50, with dark hair gathered at the back of his head and a tenacious gaze. He was dressed in a simple suit, his tie hung slightly to one side, and his face expressed either skeptical indifference or fatigue. On the business card that Mark received the day before, the name of the detective was written Tom Riley. "Mark, come in," Riley said without further ado. "Take a seat, we have something to discuss." Mark closed the door and slowly walked up to the detective's desk. His mouth went dry and he swallowed, looking around the modest but neat office. The walls were painted in light colors, with only a couple of framed diplomas and a clock hanging on them. There is no touch of noir romance, which Mark habitually attributed to detectives from Hollywood films. "Good morning," Mark answered quietly. "I hope I'm not too early." "Everything is fine. I usually come at 8, the detective nodded. "You're Mark Johnson, right? Did I remember correctly?" "Yes, Mark Johnson. Thank you for agreeing to take on the matter. To be honest, I didn't expect things to go this far. But it is important for me to understand what is happening." The detective looked at him closely, then smiled at the corner of his lips. "You are not the first to come with such suspicions. But for many, this truth turns out to be harder than they thought. Are you ready to hear what I learned?" Mark's heart seemed to clench. He felt a dry throat, an inner voice whispering to him that he needed to be prepared for the blow. "Yes, I'm ready. Tell me everything you have." Riley placed a folder with documents and photographs on the table. She didn't look too fat. At the same time, the detective was in no hurry to open it, as if he was testing the client's determination. "In your letter, you described a number of situations related to your wife, Ashley Johnson. I understand that you have long had suspicions that she is cheating on you." "Not that long ago." Mark frowned. Serious doubts appeared only a few months ago, but there were probably small warning signs before. "I noticed that she had some new source of expenses. She started using a different bank card and making strange payments. At the same time, not allowing me to even glance at the statement. Her phone became like a closed fortress to me. Some strange messages appeared, which she immediately deleted. When I tried to talk about it, she lost her temper and said that I was paranoid." "Understand. This situation is typical in adultery cases," Riley nodded. "According to you, you began to notice this after your wife changed jobs. You mentioned that she has a new boss, a certain Charlie Green." "Yes, she moved to a new company. There is a higher position there, but business trips have become more frequent. At first I was happy. I thought it was a great career opportunity. We were planning to buy a new house, have children. I was even proud of her success. But then she somehow moved away, became more secretive, and I decided that something bad had happened. Or someone appeared." With these words, Mark involuntarily faltered, saying out loud the very fact, "My wife may have found someone else," was unbearably difficult. "I can imagine how you feel," Riley said in a neutral tone. "Let me tell you what I managed to dig up during my observation." "Certainly." The detective opened the folder. He first pulled out several black and white photographs, apparently taken from a considerable distance. They showed Ashley's silhouette leaving the office. A man in a business suit stood nearby, most likely the same Charlie. In one photograph, they smiled at each other. In another, they entered a restaurant together. "I started out doing classic street surveillance," Riley explained. "I watched where she went after work, how she behaved during lunch breaks. I took most of the photos outside her office building and in a few places where your wife usually spends time outside of work. And here's the thing, she had lunch with her boss, Charlie Green, almost every day. It seems like nothing special. Colleagues can also go to lunch together. But I noticed one detail. She got into his car and they drove off somewhere towards the outskirts of the city. I would understand if it was an expensive restaurant, a business dinner, or something similar. But they stopped at a small diner in a quiet area far from the business district. Maybe I just like the food there, but you have to admit, it looks suspicious." Mark stroked the folder with his hand, feeling thoughts drilling into his head. "Well, this could be anything. What if she really just has a business relationship with her boss? I don't want to be paranoid," he said out loud. "Maybe they went there to discuss work issues in a calm atmosphere." Riley put another series of photographs in front of him, color, clearer. In them, Ashley and Charlie were sitting in a car. It seemed that the man was stroking her hand. Another photo shows their silhouettes in the doorway of an inexpensive hotel, judging by the sign in the background. It was in the evening, about 9 o'clock. This is hardly an official project discussion. It's just very informal, the detective commented. I followed them until they rented a room in this hotel for a couple of hours, after which both got out and drove off in different cars. All this is recorded. Mark exhaled deeply, feeling as if everything inside him was breaking off. He had been preparing for something like this for a long time, but reality hit him harder than imagination. He leaned forward to look at the photographs. In them, Ashley looked nervous, but didn't seem scared or unhappy. Rather, her movements revealed a special trust in Charlie. For Mark, it was almost a knife in the heart. And this is more than once, Riley continued. On different days, I saw them going to the same hotel or to similar establishments on the outskirts. This usually happened in the evenings after work. Plus, I collected some information about financial transactions. You said you noticed your wife's new card? Yes, she has been using it recently. I didn't see which bank. There's no usual logo on the map. Mark nodded, feeling his voice become hoarse. It looks like she signed up for a prepaid card that allows transactions of small amounts. Perhaps it's paying for hotels or other expenses that she doesn't want you to know about. I do not have access to the full account history. This would be illegal, and I do not have the authority to do so. But I found out that the card is registered in Ashley's name. This is an additional bill, and it came out a couple of months ago. It just coincides with the period when you began to notice changes in her behavior. Mark covered his eyes with his hand, trying to pull himself together. What shocked him most was not the fact itself, but the accumulated feeling of betrayal. After all, they had been a family for 5 years. 5 years of a happy life, joint plans, jokes, travel. He remembered how he and Ashley once stood near Niagara Falls, laughing, hugging, completely confident that their love was unshakable. I understand that this is difficult, Riley said, and softened his voice a little. But you must be aware of all the details before making decisions. I have other materials as well. I spoke with one of the office employees who saw Ashley and Charlie leaving together after work on multiple occasions. Perhaps they led a double life. Several sheets of printed notes lay on the table. The detective carefully moved them so Mark could read them. There was testimony from a certain Mike Brown who worked for the same company. They said that he repeatedly noticed Ashley and the boss after official meetings. They stayed strangely close. One day, Charlie hugged her in the hallway when he thought no one was looking. They're not really hiding, but at the same time, they're avoiding direct confirmation, Mark muttered, slowly flipping through the testimony. This really all points to an affair, right? He said the last words, as if hoping that Riley would refute his guesses, but he only slightly spread his hands. As a rule, this is a novel. It's hard for me to imagine another explanation for the two of them going to inexpensive hotels in the evenings. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Mark looked away from the papers and took a breath. My eyes burned with bitterness. He suddenly remembered how he and Ashley once joked that they would never have to go to couples psychologists because they were in perfect harmony. Now he was sitting in the detective's office, looking at a photo of his wife with another man disappearing through the door of a cheap hotel. How long did you watch her? He asked, trying to keep his voice from shaking. Almost 2 weeks, Riley answered. This was enough to gather the basic facts. You asked me to act carefully, without unnecessary advertising. I tried to be invisible. Unfortunately, for an objective picture, this period is not enough to understand all the financial nuances. But in terms of the fact itself, yes, there is an intimate connection. Tell me, what do you plan to do next? I don't know yet, Mark exhaled heavily, again raising his eyes to the photographs. I understood that this could be true, but when you see the evidence, everything turns upside down inside. I might want to talk to Ashley first, or maybe I need time to understand. I understand that someday I will be ready to resolve this issue legally if everything turns out to be as it seems, but I need to get my act together. Certainly. I can give you recommendations for lawyers who specialize in divorce and property disputes, the detective said. But this is your choice. My job is to provide information, but what you do with it is up to you." Mark nodded, gathering his scattered thoughts into a heap. He couldn't believe that all this was happening in reality. Here he is, an ordinary man who lived in marriage for 5 years, loved his wife, made plans. And suddenly they proved to him. His wife betrayed him. She has a secret life with her boss. How did it all start? How long ago? Is all this really the result of some unspoken grievances, or was Ashley just chasing the thrill? "Can I take these materials with me?" he asked, pointing to the photos and notes. "Yes, of course," Riley answered calmly. "I have prepared a copy for you. I keep the originals in case I need to make a formal appearance in court. But you can take duplicates. They will be useful to you for personal purposes or consultation with a lawyer." When Mark stood up, the detective handed him a thick envelope, neatly tied with an elastic band. As Mark took it, he felt as if an even greater weight had fallen on his shoulders than before. Inside this envelope was kept all the ins and outs of Ashley's life, these photographs that could completely destroy their family life. "Thank you. I'll transfer you the remaining amount for the work during the day," Mark said, trying to speak evenly. "Take your time. We have everything according to the agreement," the detective said calmly. "And one more thing. I discovered that Charlie Green is married. He also has a family, a wife. Her name is Caroline. I didn't contact her directly because I didn't have a request to do so. But if you need to involve her in conversations, keep this in mind. If you want, I can clarify the contacts." "Is he married?" Mark frowned, as if that was the last thing he expected to hear. "Oh, I didn't think about that. Perhaps this is important too. I don't know yet if I want to contact his wife. But thanks for letting me know." "Of course," Riley nodded curtly. "If you decide, let me know. Sometimes such situations can be resolved if all parties combine their efforts. But here everything is very individual." Mark was silent for a few seconds. The detective's words were spinning in his head. "Do you really need to tell anyone anything?" The thought flashed through my head. It would be fair to warn Charlie's wife. She is also deceived, just like me. But at the same time, the thought of interfering with someone else's family frightened him. And yet he understood. This tangle is not so easy to unravel. As he said goodbye, Mark briefly shook Riley's hand. He looked at him with professional detachment, like a man who had already seen a lot and knew what would happen next, a long corridor of pain, resentment, and difficult decisions. "Take care of yourself, Mark," the detective said, "and remember not to act rashly. Think it over carefully." "Thank you," Mark replied, clutching the envelope in his hand. He felt that he needed to get out into the fresh air as soon as possible. When Mark went down the stairs, he paused for a few seconds near the candy store window. The same delicious aroma of coffee pulled him inside, but he knew that now coffee and a bun would not make him feel any better. However, maybe it's worth a try, flashed through my head, because what else could help take my mind off the mental pain at least a little? In the end, he did just that. He entered the cafe and sat down at a corner table, trying to find at least some kind of calm. The young waitress brought him a cappuccino and a croissant. Mark ran his hand over his face, trying to pull himself together. Pictures were spinning in my head. Photographs of Ashley and Charlie, their smiles, shadows in the hotel doors. He mechanically broke off pieces of the croissant, but did not feel its taste. I looked at the phone screen, where new notifications were flickering, including from Ashley. "How are you? Everything is fine? I have a lot to do today. I'll be late to work." The message itself was ordinary, but now he perceived everything through the prism of the revealed truth. When Mark returned home, it was dark in the windows, although the day had not yet completely faded. Oddly enough, he understood that the sight of a quiet and cozy house now had a depressing effect on him. After all, behind these walls, there was now a smell of lies and betrayal. He put the keys on the shelf and walked into the living room. I stopped in the twilight. Everything seemed painfully familiar: a common sofa, Ashley's favorite chair, a table lamp. But now every object seemed to take on a different meaning. It was as if the house was no longer a safe haven, but was turning into a setting for someone else's story. A message arrived on the phone from Ashley. She wrote that she would most likely be delayed until 10 in the evening because the boss asked to finish an urgent report. Mark smiled bitterly. Now these words sounded completely different to him. The boss asked. Perhaps this was a cover for another visit to the hotel. Or is she really sitting in the office? Mark realized that it was already difficult for him to believe anything she said or wrote. He sat down on the sofa and took out an envelope with photographs. I leafed through them for a long time, studying every detail. With each new photo, a painful burning sensation in my chest grew. Here's Ashley in a beige trench coat walking out of an office building, laughing at something Charlie said. In another photo, they are standing next to each other, their shoulders almost touching. And finally, photographs from the hotel. Somewhere in the depths of his soul, Mark still hoped. What if this is not what I think? Maybe they just. But no, these pictures are too eloquent. Thoughts stopped. He wanted to throw out his emotions, break something, scream, but he restrained himself. It's not in his nature. All his life he believed that any problem could be solved through conversation and compromise. And yet now it seemed to him that the conversation could only make matters worse. Should I call Ashley right now and arrange a showdown? Or wait until she gets home? Will she deny everything? Most likely, yes. He imagined how she looked at the evidence with fear, how her face turned pale, and her lips began to babble something. This is all not true. Or, you misunderstood. After thinking, Mark decided to wait. Perhaps it was cowardice, but he was not yet ready for open confrontation. He stood up and hid the envelope deeper in the desk drawer. Then he slowly walked through the rooms. Somewhere in the corner of the hallway, he saw Ashley's shoes, her favorite beige pumps. Previously, they seemed to him a nice detail of their life, but now, for some reason, they hurt his eyes, reminding him of her secret life. A thought crept into my head. I need to consult a lawyer, as the detective advised. But Mark was in no hurry. He didn't know if he was ready to end the relationship. Maybe he can forgive, or will they try to restore everything? But how can he live with the thought that Ashley was able to deceive him for so long? The clock ticked on the wall, and every sound seemed to press on my nerves. At some point, Mark decided to do something household. He opened the refrigerator, took out semi-finished products, mixed vegetables, and chicken breast. Cooking could provide a temporary distraction. I turned on the TV as a background to drown out my thoughts, but there was some kind of series about a police investigation on there, even more reminders of betrayal, and other dramatic stories. Mark quickly changed the channel, but didn't find anything suitable and, sighing, turned off the sound. He ate mechanically, without really feeling the taste. Then he put away the dishes, sat down at the table, and automatically began to go over in his mind what options he had. Maybe I need to find some specific evidence so Ashley can't get away with it. Or is it better to immediately say that I know everything and let her explain herself? What if she pours tons of lies and accusations on me? All these questions swarmed in my head, giving me no rest. Finally, he jumped when he heard the sound of the front door opening. It was already about 11 in the evening. Ashley returned home. He heard her quietly taking off her shoes, trying not to make any noise. Usually, when she returned, she called him, "Mark, are you still awake?" But this time, the silence was palpable. He had to go out into the hallway. Ashley winced when she saw him. The face showed fatigue and tension. "Hello," she said quietly. "Are you still awake?" "No, I was waiting for you," Mark answered. His voice sounded as if from afar. "Sorry it's late. I was late to work." She stopped in the aisle, looking into his eyes. "How is your day?" Mark wanted to say, "I went to a private detective, and now I know everything about your outings with Charlie." But the words stuck in my throat. "My day went fine," he said after a short pause. "Your work apparently puts too much pressure on you, since you're so tired." She looked down, throwing off her coat. She seemed afraid to look into his eyes. "Yes, we have a complex project now. Charlie requires full commitment. I hope that in a couple of weeks everything will settle down and we can relax a little." Mark felt a bitter taste in his mouth. She literally talks about Charlie, mentions him as a strict boss, and at the same time sleeps with him behind my back, he thought. It's clear. Well, maybe I should help you relax, he asked with slight irony, checking how she would react. Ashley frowned slightly as she noticed the unkind smile on her husband's face. You seem angry, or did it seem to me? She asked warily. I'm just tired, too, and it's strange for me to see you coming home in this state. You've become very irritable lately. Ashley took a step towards the living room as if she wanted to avoid a direct conversation. Mark, I don't want to swear now. I really can barely stand on my feet. Let's move this to tomorrow. Mark sighed and nodded, knowing that he might not feel any better tomorrow either. He felt a wave of anger and resentment growing inside him, but he could hardly restrain himself from exploding. Not now. We must wait for the right moment and deal with this whole situation. Too many emotions in a day. Okay, he said, trying to speak evenly. Rest. Ashley went into the bedroom, and Mark remained in the darkness of the living room, feeling his hands shaking with tension. He heard her close the door behind her and her bag fall to the floor. I wanted to rush in after him, throw the photographs on the bed, and shout out, "Explain what this is." But instead, he slowly sank down onto the sofa and covered his face with his hands. A tear rolled from his eyes, and he was surprised by it. Is he really crying? The silence of the night fell. The house was plunged into darkness, and only the lamp in the kitchen remained on. Mark sat like that for about 10 minutes, and then got up and walked into the office, trying not to make any noise. He opened the drawer, where there was an envelope with photographs. He thought, let him lie here for now. I'll make a decision tomorrow. The morning brought only new tension for Mark. Ashley tried to act like everything was fine. She quickly left the house for work, without even trying to start a long conversation. Mark saw her nervously checking her phone, occasionally looking back at him. She was probably afraid that he would say something, but he pretended to be immersed in reading some documents. When the door slammed behind her, Mark shook his head and decided that he could no longer tolerate this game of silence. She can't just sit and wait for the betrayal to continue. But what to do? Should I call a lawyer, or should I talk to my best friend? He began to scroll through the names of loved ones. His parents lived in another city, and he definitely didn't want to dump all this on them, at least not now. Friends. I have a college friend, Jason, who always had a knack for stories like this. But saying something like this is like announcing your own weakness. Mark was ashamed that he had not noticed the betrayal earlier. Remembering the detective's words, he felt a certain inner urge. What about Charlie's wife? After all, she is also a victim of this situation. As Mark turned this over in his head, he suddenly realized that perhaps if he could find a way to contact Caroline, they could figure out the situation together. But is it worth doing this on the sly? In any case, first it was necessary to at least find out something about her. Mark decided to write to Detective Riley and ask him for the contact information of Charlie's wife, of course, not official information, but at least a page on social networks or something else. He took out his cell phone, found the detective's business card, and typed a message. Tom, hello. This is Mark. I would like to clarify, is it possible for you to give me some contact information for Charlie Green's wife? I'm not sure yet that I will contact her, but I want to understand who to contact. I sent it and waited for a response. While the phone was lying on the table, Mark felt an irrepressible anxiety. He remembered the family holidays that he and Ashley had, the Christmas evenings when they decorated the tree and made wishes. Now all this has become some kind of false memory, seasoned with bitterness. It suddenly became unbearably hard for him to think that all their plans had been trampled upon. How could she? Was their love just an illusion? The phone vibrated and Mark jumped. A message came from the detective. Hi, Mark. There is her profile on a social network. I found the information during the initial investigation. I can send you a link, but be careful if you contact her. This could cause a chain reaction. Mark replied that he understood the risks and asked for a link. Almost immediately, I got what I needed. the account of a certain Caroline Green, judging by the photo, an attractive woman of about 35. He took a closer look at the profile. In the header was a family photograph: Caroline, her husband Charlie, and their two teenage children. Mark felt his heart sank. They also had children, and Charlie got involved in an affair, possibly destroying his family. And Ashley is part of this now, he thought sadly. Feeling an inner trembling, Mark did not immediately write to this woman. He imagined her reaction. "Hello, I'm your colleague's husband. She's cheating on me with your husband." Sounds like something out of a cheap talk show. But he understood that sooner or later this truth might emerge, and it's better if they find out everything right away than to live in ignorance. He put the phone aside, deciding that he needed to meet with the lawyer first. So I did. A couple of hours later, he was already walking to the city center, where the office of a famous lawyer, whom his colleagues had once recommended, was located. The lawyer had a reputation as a tough negotiator, especially in cases involving infidelity, divorce proceedings, and property disputes. Mark entered a small office building with a glass facade, went up to the third floor, and found the lawyer's secretary, who, having learned that the visit was urgent, asked him to wait until Mr. McGuire was free. Mark sat down in a leather chair, inhaling the smell of coffee and expensive perfume. I heard the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Everything was turning upside down in his soul, and he thought that a month ago he could not even imagine such a situation. Finally, a stately man of about 40 came out and invited him into the office. Introduced himself as Tom McGuire. The office was decorated with shelves of legal literature, and several diplomas and awards hung on the wall. "Sit down, Mark," the lawyer said in a calm and confident tone. "How can I help?" I have a problem. I suspect that my wife is cheating on me. I want to understand how best to protect my interests if I decide to get a divorce. It's not that simple. We have joint accounts, a house that we bought while married." McGuire listened attentively, occasionally making notes on a sheet of paper. He asked if there were children. Mark replied that there were no children. It seems that this at least simplified something. Then the lawyer asked him to state the facts, and Mark carefully, without unnecessary details, told about his visit to the detective, about the photographs, about the fact that Ashley had opened a new bank account. McGuire nodded from time to time and asked clarifying questions. "I understand," the lawyer concluded when Mark finished. "In our state, treason can be taken into account when dividing property, although it depends on a number of circumstances. If you have documentary evidence and photos, this can work in your favor, especially if we are talking about adultery, which entails the waste of family funds. In addition, if she transferred money to this hidden account, perhaps funds from the general budget would appear there." Mark swallowed. He didn't particularly understand the legal intricacies, but he understood that this whole situation could result in a big scandal. "I'm not sure I want to file for divorce immediately," he admitted. "Maybe I want to talk to her first, to understand what happened. What if there is a chance to save the marriage?" McGuire leaned back in his chair, clasping his fingers together. "It's your right, Mark. However, if you have evidence, I advise you not to publish it until you decide what you want to do. If she suddenly finds out that you hired a detective and are already consulting with a lawyer, she may take retaliatory steps, try to hide finances, remove evidence, and so on. But saving your marriage is your conscious choice. The problem is that people who once decide to be unfaithful rarely change unless they are harshly exposed. From experience, in such cases, it is better to clearly understand whether you are ready to forgive and on what conditions." Mark felt even more confused. He didn't like the idea that his marriage was now under the rule of war, as if he and Ashley were rivals rather than loving spouses. "Perhaps I'll take a break for now," he said, standing up. "Thank you for the consultation. Can I contact you when I decide on the next steps?" "Of course." McGuire handed him a business card. "I'll be waiting for your call. Hang in there, Mark. This is a difficult situation, but you are not alone. The main thing is to remain calm and collect the facts." Mark woke up at 5 in the morning when it was still barely light. The night did not bring him peace. He tossed and turned in bed, remembering how until recently he considered his life quite happy. A stable job, a cozy home, a smart and beautiful wife, Ashley. And now everything has turned upside down. He has received irrefutable evidence of her cheating with Charlie, Ashley's boss. Anger smoldered in his chest, mixed with bitterness and resentment. But Mark was not going to let the situation take its course. He quietly made his way out of the bedroom, trying not to wake his wife. I sat down at my laptop in the kitchen and thoughtfully typed in the password for one of the joint accounts that I had opened a long time ago at a local bank. Access, of course, was shared, but now Mark wanted to cut Ashley off from the money so that she could not use their joint funds secretly from him. Too many people I know who have found themselves in similar situations have experienced the betrayed party hastily cleaning out their accounts. He decided not to let this happen. "Forgive me, Ashley," he thought bitterly, "but since you cheated, I'm not going to close my eyes and lose all my savings." He logged into his personal online banking account, transferred the required amount to a separate account where only he had individual access, and then changed the passwords. A combination of numbers and symbols appeared in his head spontaneously, no hint, no connection to his date of birth or anniversary. He wanted her to under no circumstances guess this code. My heart sank unpleasantly from the very fact that I had to take such measures against my own wife. In the same way, he moved to other accounts, the one where they saved money for a rainy day and another one for a future vacation. Mark changed passwords methodically. In the gray pre-dawn twilight, under the quiet hum of the refrigerator, he acted like a surgeon performing a careful but life-saving intervention. When the last password was changed, he breathed a sigh of relief. Now, he thought, Ashley and Charlie wouldn't be able to do something nasty to him so easily. Meanwhile, it had already become a little lighter outside the window. He stood up and walked into the corridor. I heard Ashley moving in the bedroom. She was probably waking up. Mark understood well that their difficult conversation was still ahead, but now he must complete everything he had in mind, protect his property and his financial independence, and, of course, take the next important step. The question of home was an almost painful topic for Mark. She and Ashley bought this house together, planned a future family here, dreamed of children, holidays, and cozy evenings. But betrayal destroyed trust, and Mark did not want to take risks. He listened to stories of people who relied on the integrity of their spouses and as a result lost property or found themselves embroiled in long property litigation. Immediately after breakfast, Mark called a taxi and went to the law office, where he had already arranged a meeting with the registrar in advance. He discussed the re-registration procedure with the lawyer. Yes, formally this required the consent of his wife, but it was possible to get by with an additional agreement, because initially most of the money invested belonged to Mark. He received an inheritance from his uncle even before the wedding and contributed a significant amount to the purchase. After long consultations, collecting papers, and discussing details over the phone with the registrar, he managed to secure the right of sole ownership. His lawyer warned that this was a risky move, and if Ashley decided to go to court, she could challenge the document. But Mark felt that the sooner he took action, the better he would protect his interests. At some point, sitting in the office, he caught himself with a strange feeling. When she and Ashley chose this house, they did it together, weighing the pros and cons of each option, walking through the rooms, imagining how the furniture would be arranged, where they would put the tree for Christmas. And now he sits here alone, clutching papers in his hands. It would seem that this is a victory, but for some reason there was a bitter taste in my mouth. The lawyer asked something, clarified details, and asked for signatures on several documents. Mark signed automatically. At the end, he received a weighty folder formal confirmation of sole ownership of the house. "Thank you," Mark thanked, getting up. "I understand that this may not solve all the problems, but I want to protect myself." The lawyer nodded, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Understand. This is a logical step on your part. If you have any questions, please contact us. But I recommend keeping in mind, if it comes to court, she may be able to challenge part of the ownership. However, now it's better than nothing." Mark left the building with a heavy heart. He did everything he considered necessary, but he did not feel joy. He no longer deceived himself. The world as he knew it had collapsed. It was strange to return to the house that now belonged only to him. It no longer seemed like a cozy place, rather, a fortress that protects against betrayal. The next point of the plan was to attract someone from Charlie's entourage to his side. The information that Charlie is also married became an important trump card for Mark. If Charlie's wife, a certain Caroline, does not suspect the betrayal, but finds out the truth, then her anger can turn the situation in Mark's favor. Fortunately, through mutual acquaintances, he found out that Caroline's lawyer was Mrs. Calhoun, a tough and businesslike woman who had already conducted several high-profile divorce cases in their state. True, Mark didn't know if she was aware of Charlie's relationship on the side. Just in case, he found her number and called her, introducing himself politely and carefully. "Good afternoon. May I speak to Mrs. Calhoun? My name is Mark Johnson." "I'm listening to you, Mr. Johnson," answered a calm female voice. "How can I help?" Mark took a deep breath, trying to speak without unnecessary emotions. "I learned that you are Mrs. Green's lawyer, Caroline Green. Is this correct?" "Yes, I handle several cases for the Green family. What do you want to talk about?" "The fact is that I have important information regarding her husband, Charlie Green. He's involved in a relationship with my wife. I found out that Charlie has been cheating on her for a long time, and I have all the evidence in my hands, right down to photographs, statements of payment for hotel rooms. I know it's sensitive, but Caroline needs to know. Maybe you can connect me with her, or at least tell her to get in touch herself. It is important for me to discuss further steps with her." There was a pause at the other end of the line. Apparently, Mrs. Calhoun was trying to decide what the right thing to do was. "If what you say is true, this could have serious legal consequences," the lawyer finally said. "However, I cannot disclose information about my client. I can only say that I will pass on your words and contact information to her. Then she will decide for herself whether to contact you or not." "Okay, thanks," Mark said. "I'll wait for the call." He hung up, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. The next step has been taken. Now we just need to wait for Caroline's reaction. Yes, the situation could turn against him. Suddenly, Charlie's wife would take her husband's side, try to hush up the scandal, or bring charges of slander against Mark. But Mark hoped that she would turn out to be a strong woman who would not tolerate such betrayal. If she finds out that Charlie is cheating, and even invested some joint funds in these secret meetings, she may well join forces with Mark. About a week has passed. Ashley looked more and more depressed by the day, especially after discovering that she couldn't access their joint accounts. But Mark kept his distance, only gloomily reporting that this is how it should be. He didn't want to make a scandal now. There were more serious steps ahead. One evening, as he sat in the living room and thought about what had happened, his phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. "Hello?" Mark picked up the phone. "Good evening. My name is Caroline Green. I was given your contact by my lawyer, Mrs. Calhoun. I would like to meet." A female voice rang out, firm, but at the same time trembling with barely restrained emotions. "They say you have evidence that my husband—" She stopped short, as if she had swallowed a lump. "Is cheating on me with your wife." "Yes, there is," Mark answered dryly. "When and where is it convenient for you to meet?" They agreed on neutral territory, a small cafe outside the city, in order to avoid random glances from acquaintances. Mark arrived a little earlier than the appointed time. He sat down at a corner table where a dim lamp was burning. The cafe hall was almost empty, and the light background music did not interfere with the conversation. He was nervously drumming his fingers on the tabletop when he suddenly saw an elegant blonde woman of about 35 enter the door. She glanced around the room and approached him. "Are you Mark Johnson?" she asked, sitting down. "Yes, and you are Caroline, I understand." She looked at him with a look that mixed both determination and quiet despair. It was noticeable that this decision was not easy for her, to meet with a strange man to discuss the affair of her own husband. "Tell me everything," Caroline demanded quietly, avoiding verbosity. Mark pulled out a heavy envelope. There were photographs, printouts of hotel transaction histories, and from time to time, screenshots of correspondence that the private investigator was able to capture while observing Charlie and Ashley. There were also several testimonies from witnesses who saw them together. Caroline watched it all, barely blinking. Her hands trembled. Sometimes she pressed her palm to her lips, as if she was afraid that she might scream out loud. In one of the photos, Charlie could clearly be seen stroking Ashley's waist before entering the hotel room. Oh God. She exhaled, closing her eyes, and sat silently for several moments. She seemed to be digesting what she had seen. How long ago? All this? As far as I understand, they have been dating for several months, Mark answered in a colorless voice. My wife needed to communicate with the boss, but apparently the working relationship grew into something more. I found out about this recently. First, I tried to understand what was going on, and then I hired a detective. And I didn't notice anything. Caroline shook her head. Charlie said that he had a difficult time at work. He disappeared in the evenings. I thought he was striving for promotion, eager to sign big contracts. I attributed everything to his stress. She clutched the edge of the table with her hands. Anger flashed in his eyes, which a minute ago had been full of confusion. What a scoundrel he is. We have 2 children. Well, okay. Thank you for having the courage to warn me, Mr. Johnson. But what do you want from me? She looked at Mark intently. I want him to get what he deserves, he answered, not hiding the despair in his voice. I'm not going to defend my wife. She's also to blame. But from your hands, the blow to Charlie will be stronger than from mine. If you file for divorce with evidence of his infidelity, it will affect both your reputation and finances. Caroline frowned. What are you planning to do with your wife? To begin with, I closed off all general accounts and registered the house only in my own name, Mark said bluntly. So now she depends on me financially. Perhaps he will file for divorce, perhaps he will try to beg for forgiveness. But I took measures to protect my part of the property. Caroline smiled bitterly. You know, all these years I thought that Charlie was a reliable family man, and he turned out to be a liar. Since he decided to exchange our family for this affair, then let him pay. I probably won't delay. I also need to hire a detective for formal reporting and get a lawyer, but I already have Mrs. Calhoun. We will sue, and I will do everything so that he is left with nothing. It was clear from Caroline's face that she was on the verge of tears, but she was holding on with all her might. Mark felt respect for her and sad sympathy at the same time. I'm ready to provide all the materials I have, he said. You can use them in court. She nodded, putting the pictures back into the envelope. Fine. I promise I won't let him get away with it. At some point, Caroline literally burst into flames. She dropped all restraint and feigned business tone. You can't even imagine what a storm he brought upon himself. I gave 17 years of my life to this marriage, and this is how he treats me. Do you think I'll just let him make off with the money? Never. I'll tear it down in court. He has shares, savings, half of the house is also mine by law. I will win everything back to the last cent. Mark saw her eyes sparkle with anger. He realized that she was not bluffing. For her, this is not just a painful offense, but a determination to protect herself and her children. There was something frightening and at the same time respectful in this determination. I'll help as much as I can, Mark assured her. I will provide all printouts, photos, and testimony of my detective. I have no goal to finish you off with additional details. I just want justice to prevail. She nodded, took a breath, trying to get her emotions under control. Yes, we agreed. We will join forces. If you need any legal advice, I will speak with my lawyer, Mrs. Calhoun. She is very strong in divorce cases. But I admit, the best I can do is publicly show what a hypocrite Charlie is. In society, he likes to play the role of an ideal husband and almost a champion of family values. Let everyone know the truth now. They exchanged contacts and clarified how to transfer files. Mark was glad that he had found an ally. Alone, he might have had a harder time exposing Charlie. Now the two of them had the opportunity to put pressure on their lovers. When the meeting ended and they stood up from the table, Caroline gave him a bitter parting smile. "Thank you for deciding to show me all this. Now he won't have a chance. I will bring judgment and public censure upon him. He will pay dearly for his betrayal." Several more weeks passed, filled with tense expectations. Mark saw Ashley not being herself, calling somewhere, writing messages, periodically screaming into the phone. Obviously, she had conflicts with Charlie. After Caroline began divorce proceedings, the situation became public, and Charlie's business circle began to talk about immoral behavior. The leader's reputation has been shaken. Ashley looked increasingly depressed and sometimes said things like, "Charlie promised nothing would happen to me," or "He says he denies everything." Mark watched quietly without interfering. He's already done his part. When the hearing date was finally officially set, Mark watched from the sidelines as Caroline filed for divorce, presenting all the evidence he had given her. She also hired another detective who found more details: emails, checks, printouts of hotel reservations in Charlie's name. At the trial, Mrs. Calhoun laid it all out in front of the judge. Charlie himself was apparently taken by surprise by these revelations. Perhaps he hoped to the last that he could get out of it by denying or downplaying his guilt. But there was too much evidence. It was clear that the judge was looking at him with outright hostility. After all, Charlie didn't just go to the left, but actually spent part of the family budget on meetings with his mistress. Caroline asked to find him guilty, collect a significant amount from him, and also give her most of the property, taking into account moral damage and the presence of children. As a result of the trial, Charlie suffered major losses. By court decision, he was ordered to pay serious alimony to Caroline and support the children. Several valuable assets that he held in his name had to be transferred to his wife. Plus, having lost the image of a respectable family man, he faced hostility from the top management of the company. The authorities did not want to see in the ranks of top management a person involved in a dirty scandal. As a result, Charlie was asked to resign amicably by agreement of the parties. He lost a stable, highly paid position, and for him it was a blow to his pride and financial situation. Mark came home that evening both devastated and at the same time strangely satisfied. He knew that Charlie had learned a harsh lesson for his betrayal. Lawyers for Charlie's wife, Caroline, obtained large compensation, alimony, and division of property through the court, and the scandal hit the entire company. Charlie was effectively forced out of his position, and his career was in serious doubt. Sitting in the car in front of his own house, Mark looked at the familiar facade. It seemed that he was seeing this two-story cottage for the first time. A conflicting feeling flared up inside. Until recently, their common home was filled with memories of happiness, but now it caused a bitter burning sensation. A whole kaleidoscope of pictures popped up in my head. How she and Ashley chose this particular building, how they rejoiced at the bright living room, how they laid out the furniture and discussed where the fireplace would be. But now all this seemed like scenery that did not coincide with real life. Perhaps it's time to move on, flashed through his mind, but then he felt a painful prick. The decision to divorce cannot be made hastily. No matter what happened between them, he couldn't just erase 10 years of marriage. In the end, they were not young lovers, but spouses who had recently dreamed of a future, of children. Plucking up his courage, Mark opened the car door and got out. Over the past few weeks, he had gotten into the habit of occasionally sleeping in the guest room. He didn't want to share Ashley's bed, filled with suspicion, resentment, and resentment. But something told him the moment was approaching when he needed to stop hiding. It's time to talk directly and not just sort things out, but dot all the I's. There was a soft light in the living room. Ashley was home, or at least Mark noticed her bag at the entrance. He entered, sighing heavily. There was a slight smell of coffee in the air. She probably made herself a cup in an attempt to cope with stress. "Ashley," he called quietly. He expected to hear from her the usual, "I'm in the kitchen," or at least the sound of her steps. But the answer is silence. Walking a little further, he saw that she was sitting on the sofa in the semi-darkness, clasping her knees with her hands. The phone lay in front of her. The screen went dark. She looked up when he entered, and in the dim light of the lamp her eyes seemed swollen from tears. "Hello," Mark said hesitantly. Ashley tried to smile, but it came out forced. It was immediately clear that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Hello," she answered hoarsely. "I wanted to talk to you." Mark took off his jacket, hung it on the hanger, and paused for a moment at the door, wondering whether it was worth starting a frank conversation now. But the decision came naturally. If she is ready, she needs to seize the moment. "Fine. Let's talk," he said quietly, sitting down opposite her. She placed the phone on the coffee table, as if admitting that there was nothing left to hide. For several seconds they were silent, peering at each other, not knowing where to start. Her eyes sparkled, with shadows of fatigue beneath them. Once he found her gaze special and familiar, but now he caught himself thinking that he was seeing a stranger. "Mark," she finally said, looking at her folded hands, "I know you know. What evidence do you have?" "Evidence of what exactly?" he asked dryly, although he already knew the answer. Ashley clenched her fingers painfully. "My betrayal. My affair with Charlie." The way she said it directly made Mark feel even worse. It was as if he heard confirmation of something he didn't want to believe. For a moment, rage flared up in him, but he pulled himself together and said calmly, "So you'll confess?" "Yes." Her voice broke. "I admit it. I... I can no longer deny the obvious, and I don't want to. Everything got out of control, and I don't know how it happened." She extended her hand as if trying to touch him, but Mark automatically pulled away. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "You may not believe it, but I'm really sorry. I didn't want to destroy us." He was silent, feeling mixed emotions suffocating him from within. Anger, resentment, regret about lost years. Everything was mixed up, and it was difficult to determine which part of his heart was screaming louder. "I didn't want to, but I did," he said quietly, looking into her reddened eyes. "For what?" Her throat convulsed, as if she was trying to swallow a lump. "I don't know. Charlie and I talked a lot at work. He helped me with projects, saw me as a promising specialist. I felt that I was finally trusted with serious tasks, that I was important. He began to show signs of attention, saying that I was extraordinary. And at some point, I just lost my head." Mark listened without interruption. The words "lost my head" hurt my ears. It seemed to him that a person does not lose his head when he consciously goes to a hotel with his boss, draws up some fraudulent bank cards, and builds a whole system of lies. But he kept the thought to himself, knowing that he was ready for a larger conversation. "When did you realize that this was not an innocent flirtation?" he asked finally. "When did everything go so far that it was no longer possible to stop?" Ashley took a deep breath, hugging herself by the shoulders as if she was shivering from the cold. "Probably on the day when we were alone for the first time after a late meeting in the office. He offered to consult on the project. In reality, we were just going to that diner where none of our colleagues knew us. I already understood then that I was doing something unacceptable, but it was like excitement, like some kind of challenge to myself. And at the same time, I was flattered that a person like him was interested in me." She lowered her head and said the following words almost in a whisper. "I'm not looking for excuses, Mark. I committed treason. And God, I'm sorry. I'm confused." "I'm confused," he chuckled bitterly, clenching his fists. "Good word. But you were confused for months, and all this time I watched as you almost disappeared from our family, and I thought maybe you just had a rush at work." He fell silent, feeling that his voice was beginning to tremble from the rush of emotion. After a short pause, he asked, "What now? Did you and Charlie have anything planned next? Did you want to leave your family and get married? Or is this just another office romance that would fade away on its own?" The question sounded harsh, and Ashley flinched. "No, I didn't intend to leave the family. Never. Yes, I'm confused, but I love you, Mark. Even though it probably sounds crazy now. With Charlie it was. Like another life in which I felt important and needed. But here, "What's here?" Mark felt a surge of resentment. "Did you lack attention? Didn't you feel needed in your own home?" "No, not like that. It's just, after 10 years of marriage, everything became very predictable. We lived according to the rules: work, home, sometimes cinema, travel. But something was missing. Maybe passion, a surge of emotions, or maybe I made a mistake myself, starting to compare our life with something ephemeral. It seemed to me then that everything was boring, and I fell for these sweet speeches from Charlie." Her voice sounded muffled, as if she herself did not fully understand what she was saying, but she tried to somehow explain what was going on in her head. Mark stood up and took a few steps around the room so as not to sit motionless in front of her. Everything that was said sounded like lame excuses, but he knew that every betrayal had complex underpinnings. He stood at the window, watching the thin rain trickle outside. "You know," he said, turning to her, "the most offensive thing is not that you were looking for adventures on the side, but that you didn't even try to talk to me about your feelings. I didn't say that you were missing something. She just went into a secret life, deceiving me, spending our common money on hotels, and—" "I understand," Ashley whispered, "and I understand how you feel now." "No, I'm lying. I can't even imagine how much it hurts you. Sorry. Sorry." She repeated this word, sorry, almost mechanically, as if she hoped that it would cure everything at once. Mark felt that he did not have enough air in the room. He wanted to run out, but he knew that this would not solve anything. "Ashley," he finally said, "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I want to try this. Maybe we need to break everything off." At these words, she looked at him desperately. "No, please," she spoke quickly, starting to sob. "Mark, I beg you, give me a chance to explain everything, to fix it. I'm ready for anything. I'll quit my job so as not to interfere with Charlie. I'll do whatever you want. I don't want to lose you." He pursed his lips, questions feverishly swirling in his thoughts. "Is it worth it? Will I ever be able to trust her again? Leave work?" he asked, and his voice sounded sarcastic. "You adored your profession. She said that architecture and design is your calling." "I don't care," she said, straightening her back. "I don't want to work anymore where I have something to do with Charlie. If necessary, I will change my field of activity. The main thing is that we can start again." Mark exhaled heavily, but in his soul he felt a pang of doubt. Was it too late for her to be ready for anything? It sounded like a desperate attempt to hold on to something that was collapsing. "I don't know yet," he answered after a short pause. "I need time. And in general, it's not a fact that you can start over when you have such a betrayal behind you." Silence fell between them again. All that could be heard was the timid ticking of the clock and the rustle of rain outside the window. Ashley, apparently, was hoping for some more encouraging words, but without waiting, she slowly stood up. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll go take a shower and go to bed. If you want to talk more, I'll be in the room." Mark just nodded, unable to find any other words. He heard her footsteps on the stairs and the sound of the bathroom door closing. As soon as she disappeared, the tension broke through. He hit the back of the sofa with his fist, feeling a dull pain in his joints. The apparent calm with which he talked to her was kept on a thin line. Now, left alone, he felt a terrible lump of resentment and rage. Usually, in such situations, he ran to his friends for advice, but now it seemed to him that not a single friend would heal this wound. He could only decide for himself whether there was a way forward or whether it was all over. The next day, Ashley still went to the office. Mark left the house a little earlier, not wanting to see how she was getting ready, didn't want unnecessary questions, kisses on the cheek, on autopilot, or attempts at conversation. He simply felt that he was not ready for the quiet morning hypocrisy. Over the past few weeks, a whole storm of rumors has arisen at the company where Ashley worked. Charlie Green, the once respected boss, has already written his letter of resignation. But this did not mean that the conversations died down. On the contrary, the office was buzzing like a disturbed hive. Employees whispered their guesses about the reasons for the boss's departure. Someone probably knew about Charlie's connection with Ashley, while others only made assumptions, citing secret sources. In addition, the company could not leave all of Charlie's projects to chance. Management urgently appointed a new head of the department, Mr. Fenimore, a pedantic and cautious manager in his judgment. He began to sort through the rubble of unfinished business. Since many of Charlie's developments were not systematized, the technical staff had to sit until late all these days, sorting out documentation, estimates, and drawings. Ashley was also drawn into the process because she was among the lead architects of the project. Now she was forced to spend hours explaining what kind of documents were in the folder marked Archive, why strange amounts appeared in the estimates, and why some payments were made through personal cards. The scandal broke out when Fenimore noticed a discrepancy in the reports. The papers revealed that several times in recent months, Charlie signed travel expenses in Ashley's name, although in reality there were no business trips. The money was written off for accommodation at a hotel on the other side of the city, the same one where the detective had seen them more than once. "Mrs. Johnson," Fenimore said, holding her by the elbow as she was about to leave after the meeting. "I want to ask you a few questions about these strange expenses." Ashley felt her insides tighten. She felt feverish. Here it was, a direct confrontation with the consequences of the affair and in the work sphere. "Yes, Mr. Fenimore, I'm listening," she answered, trying to stay calm, but noticed how her voice trembled slightly. He pursed his lips, looking at her as if he wanted to penetrate to the very essence. "It states here that you have been on business trips 3 times in the last 2 months. Moreover, the route is the same hotel, Greenleaf Inn. I checked. This is a very modest place, far outside the business district. Can you explain why the company paid for your accommodation there?" Ashley frantically tried to find words. She understood that there was no direct explanation, and there was no use in lying. Fenimore had documents. I'm surprised. It's probably an accounting error," she muttered the first thing that came to mind. Fenimore narrowed his eyes. "Error 3 times in a row, plus a food bill, which corresponds to 2 servings of food. The report shows that you had dinner with someone else, although it was your solo business trip." He emphasized the last words, and Ashley felt panic rising inside her. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Perhaps Mr. Green." She paused, searching for words. "It was he who arranged business trips for me, including at the expense of the project. Maybe he wanted to double-check some data at the site and asked me to go." "At the facility?" Fenimore asked, knitting his eyebrows. "But the object is in the very center of the city, and this hotel is located in a coastal area which is in no way connected with our project." Ashley knew that she now looked like a pathetic liar. Fenimore was silent, but there was contempt in his eyes. He had probably already heard that Charlie and Ashley had a non-working relationship. "If you are going to continue to give such explanations," he said coldly, "I'm afraid it won't help you. Management is extremely unhappy that some employees use company funds for personal purposes. Charlie Green has already answered this. Now, if it turns out that you are involved in abuse." He didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. Ashley swallowed, feeling terrible shame. Her affair became the property of not just gossip, but official proceedings. "I can only say that I did not knowingly participate in financial fraud," she said quietly. "I'm really sorry that all this happened." Yes," Fenimore massaged his temples. "I think we will conduct an internal investigation. And if it turns out that you signed some fake reports with Mr. Green, the consequences will be very serious." She just nodded, not making any excuses. It became clear to her that all paths in this company were blocked for her. Even if she doesn't get caught for embezzlement, she will no longer be trusted. Rumors about a connection with the boss and joint fraud with business trips will become a red rag for management. When she left Fenimore's office, her legs were shaking. Some colleagues cast sidelong glances, some with a malicious grin, some with sympathy. Ashley literally felt contempt and curiosity mixed in one cocktail. "I have to quit," she thought as soon as she got to her workplace. "There's no point in staying anymore." She remembered Mark saying, "You're not going to leave the job you love so much, are you?" And she swore that she would leave just to save the marriage. Now it became obvious. This step would soon be taken, but it would be forced because the working atmosphere was turning into hell. Taking a folder from the shelf that contained her personal work on projects, Ashley hid it in her bag. Then she mechanically began to put away some trinkets, a photograph from a corporate party, a cup with the inscription, "Creative Mind," a table stand for pencils. She didn't know whether she would be able to pack her things today or whether it would be better to wait until the internal investigation was over, but she already felt that this was the end. How did I get to this point? Flashed through my head. Was the desire for a fleeting sense of personal attractiveness worth the destruction of a marriage, the loss of a respected position, and possibly a career reputation? She held back her tears with difficulty, realizing that now all eyes would turn to her if she cried. But everything was burning inside. A few days later, Mark was looking through his saved contacts on his phone, trying to find someone who could help him understand his own feelings. Friends were not an option. Some might not understand the depth of the pain, others might only sympathize. Should I tell my parents? Too hard and awkward. They adored Ashley, considering her almost a daughter. The number of a psychologist who was once recommended by a work colleague, David, came to mind. The man specialized in marriage counseling, helping couples who were on the verge of divorce. Mark was tossing around for a long time to go or not to go, but in the end I decided, if there is a chance to calm the chaos in my head, it's worth a try. He made an appointment. The psychologist's office was located in a discreet one-story building on the outskirts of the city, far from a noisy highway. There was a calm atmosphere inside. Soft armchairs, pastel-colored wallpaper, unobtrusive light. The psychologist's name was Steve Garner, a man of about 40, with a short beard and expressive eyes. "Have a seat, Mark," Steve said, pointing to the chair opposite him. "I am fluently familiar with your story, as far as you managed to describe it over the phone. But I want you to tell us in more detail what brought you here." Mark felt tension in his throat. Even voicing his situation out loud is difficult, especially to a stranger. But that's what he came for. "My wife, Ashley, she cheated on me," he said dully. "And this lasted for several months with her boss. Now this boss has been fired and his wife has filed for divorce. And I can't figure out what to do. I'm angry, offended, disappointed. And at the same time, I can't just up and leave without a fight, because I love her. Or rather, he loved." He paused for a second to find his words. "We've been together for 10 years. I don't want to end our marriage abruptly. But honestly, I don't know if I can ever trust her." Steve listened carefully, nodding from time to time. "I understand that your pain is very strong. Cheating is a serious blow to self-esteem and trust in a marriage. You said you're considering staying in the relationship if at all possible. Have you discussed this with Ashley?" "Yes, we talked," Mark sighed, remembering their conversations. "She seems to say that she's ready for anything, that she loves me. But words can be empty, and even if she sincerely regrets now, the betrayal has already happened. I don't know how to live with this anymore." "I'll ask you an awkward question, Mark." Steve looked at him sympathetically. "Do you want revenge? That is the desire to teach her a lesson and control her so that she suffers the consequences that keeps you in your marriage? Or are you still looking for a way to restore intimacy?" Mark fell silent in confusion. In fact, somewhere deep in his soul, there was anger that wanted Ashley to drink the cup of humiliation to the bottom. But at the same time, he understood that this would not bring true relief. "I don't want to play these games," he finally managed to say. "Deep inside, I would like everything to be like before, but I understand that it won't be like before. Maybe we need a new format of relationship or a breakup altogether." Steve nodded. "That is, you think about a second chance, but you realize that the past cannot be returned. This is an important understanding, just like the fact that forgiveness is a long and painful process, and not a once-and-for-all act. Perhaps a few sessions together would help, if Ashley is willing to come." Mark squeezed the armrests of the chair. I don't know if I'm ready to go to a psychologist with her now. It seems like I need to figure it out on my own. Then let's start with you. Let's consider your feelings, your value system. Sometimes people who have experienced betrayal find that it destroys not only their trust in their partner, but also their sense of self. Mark felt his chest tighten, but nodded. They talked for almost an hour. Steve asked questions that helped to better understand what exactly was holding Mark back in the relationship. Fear of loneliness, love, habit, sense of responsibility, or maybe all at once. Mark talked about how their marriage was happy in the first years, how they fought for their careers together, and how they traveled a lot. And how in the last couple of years something in their relationship began to fade, but he did not attach serious importance to it. Perhaps, Steve concluded, Ashley also had an internal crisis that you didn't know about because she didn't talk and you didn't ask. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't excuse her behavior. But if you want to understand why everything happened this way, you need to look at the context of your life together. Yes, Mark agreed dully. Looks like I missed something important. Maybe if we had shared our feelings openly, none of this would have happened. But now it's too late to regret. It's too late to influence the past, Steve corrected him, but it's not too late to decide how to build the future. And this requires awareness. Are you ready to try to restore the connection, or would you prefer to live separately? Any decision will have consequences. At the end of the session, Steve suggested doing a series of exercises to understand your emotions, keeping a diary, recording moments when feelings of anger overwhelm you, and try to formulate what exactly provokes the outburst. Mark, although he was not sure of the effect, promised to try. He left the office a little exhausted, but as if a little more aware. There was a long road ahead. He did not yet know where it would lead. In the evenings, an awkward silence reigned in the house. Ashley and Mark hardly ever crossed paths. He returned late from work or went to see friends. She sat in her office with a laptop, filling out the latest reports for the office. One day she tried to say that she had written a letter of resignation, but Mark only nodded without responding with words. "Doesn't it matter to you?" she asked quietly. "It's your decision," he replied. "I can't influence the policy of your company. You probably would have been fired anyway, given the travel expenses scandal." Ashley turned pale, but remained silent. She understood that he was right. There was no choice. To leave on my own in order to avoid greater shame. She tried to resume the conversation, offering to go together to a psychologist or a family counselor, but Mark refused. "I'm not ready yet," he repeated over and over again. "I need to be alone with myself." He still spent the night in the guest room, only occasionally going into their shared bedroom to get something. The house felt cold and empty, as if the central heating had been turned off along with their previous feelings. In order not to go crazy from melancholy and guilt, Ashley tried to keep herself busy with something. But she had no friends left in the office. Many considered her a homewrecker, the boss's mistress. There were persistent rumors that she sought privileges until she got Charlie fired. Nobody wanted to deal with a toxic employee. One evening, she tried to write to an old friend with whom she had previously worked at another office. But the friend responded with a restrained message that she sympathizes with a difficult situation and added something like, "It's your own fault." Ashley smiled bitterly, realizing that there was little sympathy to be expected from anywhere. "Apparently, I really chose this path myself," she thought, sipping cold tea in the kitchen. Until recently, she seemed like a strong woman who was building a career, not afraid of adventure, but now all that was left was to sit in the twilight of her own home and feel like a traitor. She communicated minimally with Mark. He has sometimes said that he might file for divorce, but has not yet officially done so. Ashley lived in limbo, expecting that one day she might be asked to pack her things and leave, but so far he has not taken decisive steps, apparently hesitating. It was a warm Saturday evening when the doorbell rang at their house. Mark was sitting in the living room at that moment, looking at the news on his tablet, and Ashley was washing dishes in the kitchen. The call sounded insistent. Mark stood up, opened the door, and froze. Charlie Green was standing on the threshold. Seeing the owner of the house, he awkwardly smoothed his overgrown dark hair and smiled wryly. "Hi, Mark," he said, trying to sound confident, but his voice sounded quiet and tense. "I didn't think you'd open it." Mark felt anger flare up in his chest. Seeing this man in his own doorway was the last thing he wanted. "What do you want?" he asked coldly. Charlie seemed nervous as his hands were shaking. Can I come in?" "No," Mark snapped, closing the door slightly, ready to slam it at any moment. "Speak here." Footsteps were heard behind him. Ashley appeared, throwing a look at the threshold that was a mixture of fear and awkwardness. "Charlie," she whispered and froze in her tracks. Mark felt a new surge of anger. Just recently, the two of them were secretly running around hotels, and now Charlie shows up at his house. "I need to talk to you, Ashley," Charlie said, noticing her too. "Please, I know everything went wrong, but—" Mark raised his hand as if to stop him. "I don't think she wants to talk. And I definitely don't want you to cross that threshold. If you have something to say it quickly." Charlie looked at Mark with a mixture of guilt and irritation. "Okay," he said, clasping his fingers. "Ashley, I lost my job. I was thrown out as a result of this scandal. My wife filed for divorce, demanding huge payments. I literally have nowhere to live. She kicked me out of the house. I'm renting a tiny room from a friend. And I wanted to talk to you. Maybe you'll want to leave with me. Start all over again." At these words, Ashley turned white as a sheet. Mark barely restrained himself from laughing bitterly, sarcastically. Does this man really expect that she will voluntarily go to him, especially now that everything has been revealed? "Charlie," she said, still in a whisper, "are you out of your mind? I never intended to leave Mark. I didn't plan to start some new life with you." Charlie smiled wryly. "But you said that you were unhappy in your marriage, that you lacked passion." He turned to Mark, as if trying to provoke his reaction, but he only clenched his teeth and remained silent. "I thought that you and I had a real feeling, and if everything was revealed, we would be together." "No," was all she said. "I was deluded, and I didn't think it would go this far." "Great." Charlie took a step back, his face contorted with pain and anger. "So now you're leaving me too. When am I at my worst? Do you still dare to blame her?" Mark intervened, unable to remain silent any longer. "She did a stupid thing by betraying our family. But you are a married man with children who talked her into it, and you expected her to run into your arms as soon as everything burst." "Shut up," Charlie snapped. "You are nothing to her at all, if she loved me." But before he could finish speaking, Mark stepped forward, clenching his fists. "I would advise you to leave," he muttered, "until it all ended in a fight." Fear flashed in Charlie's eyes. He was taller than Mark, but much weaker physically, and also clearly morally depressed. He looked around at both of them, as if not understanding how quickly everything had collapsed. "Damn," he whispered, and his shoulders sagged. "Ashley, all I wanted was for us to be together." "Go away, Charlie," she said quietly, looking at the floor. "Please, there are already too many troubles from this story." He stood there for a minute, confused, then turned around and, cursing quietly, headed towards the gate. When he disappeared, Mark closed the door, feeling himself shaking inside. He turned to Ashley, who was standing against the wall, breathing heavily. "You see what you've gotten yourself into," he remarked bitterly. "Now this guy will appear, extorting your support." She nodded, her lips pursed. It seemed that she was about to burst into tears, but at the last moment she pulled herself together. "I'm sorry," she only whispered, unable to say more. Mark silently walked into the living room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. If earlier he felt simply deceived by his husband, now, after this scene, he realized the situation is even worse than he could have imagined. Charlie was desperately grasping at straws, and who knows what steps he might take. On Sunday evening, Mark's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but he intuitively realized that it could be something serious. "Hello," he said. "Mr. Johnson." A female voice rang out, sounding excited. This is Mrs. Calhoun, lawyer Caroline Green speaking to you. I called you earlier, remember? Yes, of course. Mark straightened up on the sofa. Did something happen? I'm afraid so. My client, that is, Caroline, discovered that Charlie was trying to challenge some of the materials provided in court. He claims that evidence of his relationship with your wife was collected illegally. Moreover, he states that you and Caroline allegedly acted in conspiracy to frame him as the culprit and take over his property. Mark felt indignation flare up in him. This is absurd. We just provided the facts about the betrayal, and he himself. I agree that it sounds absurd, the lawyer confirmed. But Charlie is trying to play on the fact that the private detective violated his personal space. Plus, he claims that you blackmailed him. Of course, we have counter-arguments, but I wanted to warn you that he could file a complaint with the police, accusing you of illegal invasion of privacy or even computer hacking, if suddenly screenshots of his email appeared somewhere. Mark cursed to himself. Indeed, Riley, a private detective, intercepted some letters, although he mostly photographed meetings in hotels. But if Charlie decides to go into conflict and files a complaint, he will have to figure out whether the detective's actions had legal grounds. What do you recommend doing? He asked with a heavy heart. I would advise you to remain calm. If there is a subpoena, contact me or your lawyer. While Charlie is trying to put psychological pressure on us, threatening scandalous revelations. But in fact, all the materials we have were obtained within the framework of the law. These are photographs taken in public places and copies of checks that he himself paid, so his chances are slim. However, be prepared for possible troubles. I see, Mark squeezed the phone. Thank you for warning me. He put the phone down and looked out the window, feeling anxiety rising inside him. It turns out that Charlie not only hit rock bottom, but also decided that he needed to blame everyone around him for his troubles. Perhaps he is toying with the idea of getting even with Mark. Well, you'll have to be careful. Ashley appeared in the kitchen. Seeing the gloomy expression on his face, she frowned. Did something happen? Mark didn't answer right away, wondering if he should tell her. But I realized that it was pointless to hide. Your ex-lover decided to counterattack, he said sarcastically. He's threatening to sue our ally Caroline, saying that I allegedly set everything up. Ashley slowly put the cup down on the table. God, has he gone completely crazy? This is ridiculous. Yes, it's ridiculous, Mark agreed, but there's nothing good about it. I don't want to waste time and energy on the legal rigmarole. She looked at him confused, as if looking for something to help. Maybe I should talk to him. Tell him not to do anything stupid. No, Mark interrupted sharply. No way. Any contact with him will only make things worse, and besides. He didn't finish the sentence, but his eyes read, I don't want you to cross paths again. Ashley looked down, feeling completely helpless. The following days passed in tense anticipation. Mark did not receive a summons. Neither the police nor Charlie's lawyers made direct contact. Apparently, Charlie was still testing the waters, trying to make threats. But every day, the atmosphere in the house became more difficult. One evening, Mark was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, perusing legal forums, looking for similar cases to see if Charlie could seriously make a difference. Ashley walked into the kitchen and timidly suggested, maybe we can go somewhere together, to a restaurant, for a walk. I haven't left the house for a long time, except for business. Mark looked up. Her eyes showed despair and hope at the same time. He felt sorry for her. She looked tired and pale. The previously beautiful smile disappeared and her face became drawn. But at the same time, he could not forget that she had hurt him. I don't want to go to the restaurant now, he answered, trying to speak evenly. Sorry. I understand, she said barely audibly, retreating to the door. However, at this moment, a new sound of an entrance bell was heard in the house. They looked at each other. I hope it's not Charlie, Mark muttered. He went to open it, and behind the door he found Ashley's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, who came from a neighboring state. They stood with suitcases and worried faces. Apparently, the cavalry decided to come. Hello, Mark. Ashley's father, Daniel Brown, a tall, gray-haired man who was usually affable, said dryly. This time there was no smile on his face. We decided to visit you. Can we come in? Mark let them into the hallway, trying to understand what was happening. Ashley, seeing her parents, rushed to them, and her mother, Mrs. Brown, immediately asked, "Daughter, what happened to you?" We didn't understand anything until rumors reached us that there was some kind of loud scandal in your office, that you had quit. And Mark, she glanced at her son-in-law. Mark, can we talk? His heart sank. A difficult conversation lay ahead with the parents, who clearly suspected something, but perhaps did not know the whole truth. Yes, of course, he finally said. Let's sit down. They went into the living room, where they sat on the sofa and armchairs. Ashley, feeling mortally ashamed, lowered her gaze, not daring to start first. Finally, the father broke the silence. Daughter, we want to hear an honest story from you. We found out that your company had an affair with the boss, that this boss is now fired, and you left too. Is this true, Ashley? Have you cheated on your husband? The words came out harshly, and Ashley felt her insides collapse. She wanted to somehow soften it, but she understood that it was useless. Yes, she admitted quietly, I made a mistake. The mother covered her face with her hands. The father shook his head. How so? Mrs. Brown whispered. Ashley, you have always been a smart, responsible girl. Mark is a wonderful man. What kind of obsession is this? I don't know, Ashley exploded, feeling that she couldn't stand their reproachful looks. I made a mistake. I betrayed Mark. But it happened. I can't change the past. Her father turned to Mark. Son, you must be horrified by what happened. You have every right, but we want to understand if there is a chance to save your marriage. Mark smiled bitterly, thinking that Ashley's parents still believed that everything could be fixed. I haven't decided yet, he admitted. It hurts me a lot. I won't say that I completely closed the door on her, but the trust was destroyed. It takes time to understand whether it can be restored. Mrs. Brown looked between Mark and Ashley, her eyes full of tears. Darling, we always loved you and were proud of you. Did you really jeopardize everything you had for some fling at work? Mom, please, Ashley said quietly, wiping away her tears. I know I deserve to be judged. But she didn't finish, and the father sighed heavily. I think my mother and I will stay in the city for a couple of days. If you need time to talk, use it. We will rent a hotel room. We will not disturb you, but please allow us to come in at least sometimes. We want to help and support you. Mark nodded, gratitude flashing in his eyes. Despite everything, Ashley's parents were really worried about the fate of their daughter and son-in-law. Of course, he replied. I understand. They all fell silent, realizing the depth of the abyss to which the family had approached. The next day, Mark canceled everything he was doing, trying to focus on his conversation with Ashley. It was impossible to continue living in limbo. Moreover, the parents are in the city, waiting for some news. He walked out into the garden, where Ashley stood with her arms wrapped around herself. It was morning. The sun was barely rising above the trees. She looked at her husband with sad eyes. Mark, I understand that there may be no point in listening to me, she said, but I want to say that I'm not going to run away from responsibility. If you want a divorce, I won't resist. There was humility and quiet pain in her voice. Mark peered into her face, again feeling a painful mixture of pity and anger. I thought about it, he finally admitted. I really was going to file for divorce to put an end to our torment. But I haven't done it yet. Do you know why? No. She looked at him questioningly, holding her breath. I still love you, he said dully. Or at least I love the woman you were before all this. We have so much in common, so many memories. But after your betrayal, everything inside me broke. She closed her eyes, trying not to let the tears fall. I understand. I am ready to do something to restore this trust. Ready to go to therapy together. Ready to report on everything if you need to. I don't want you to be under report. Marriage is not a prison, Mark smiled bitterly, but maybe we'll really try to go to a family psychologist. Try to figure out if there is a future. Thank you, she breathed, feeling that her legs were shaking. I don't deserve this chance, but I'm glad you're ready. Mark looked away to the tree branches rustling faintly in the breeze. This is not a guarantee that we will make peace, he added. Maybe in a month I'll decide that it's better to get a divorce. But at least I won't blame myself for the rest of my life for not trying. She just nodded. In the depths of her soul, she wanted to rush to him and hug him, but she felt that the boundaries did not yet allow such gestures. Let's start small. Call the psychologist I mentioned. I already went to him once. He suggested that if we were ready, we could try family sessions, Mark said. Ashley quickly agreed. Whenever, just tell me the time. I'm ready. So the first decision was made to try to save the marriage with professional help. A week later, the two of them came to see Steve Garner. The psychologist invited them to sit next to each other on the sofa, but Mark sat a little further away, and Ashley too, keeping their distance. So, I'm glad that you decided to have a joint session, Steve began, looking at both of them. Tell me what brought you today. Mark briefly recounted their current situation. The betrayal was discovered. Charlie was removed from his family and work, and he and Ashley were trying to figure out if there was any way to restore their relationship. Steve listened carefully, making notes on a notepad, then asked, "How do you both feel now, being here?" Mark glanced sideways at his wife, then said, "Honestly, I feel deceived and angry. At the same time, I have a faint hope that maybe we can still be together." Ashley clasped her hands, trying to speak calmly. "I feel guilty, ashamed, and a strong desire to fix everything. I love Mark. I want to return our relationship, if possible." Steve nodded. "Understand. The process will not be easy. If you are both ready, we can try to identify those moments where your communication has failed, where the feeling was born that you are not heard or not understood. Because betrayal is, on the one hand, the act of an individual person, and on the other hand, it is often a symptom of the fact that there is a deep crisis in a couple." Mark tensed, but it was she who changed it, not me. Why should I? "Wait," Steve interrupted him softly. "I'm not trying to say that you are to blame for her actions. I'm saying that if you want to restore your marriage, you have to work on the entire system of your relationship. Your spouse took the blame for the act of cheating, but you may have had unclosed holes in the emotional connection." Mark sighed heavily, feeling that he would have to admit that the marriage had been falling apart at the seams for some time. They came to therapy regularly over the next few weeks. Steve asked them uncomfortable questions, asked them to talk about their dreams, fears, what they shared at the beginning of the relationship and stopped sharing now. "When was the last time you looked into each other's eyes and talked about feelings?" asked the psychologist at one of the sessions. They looked at each other and Ashley smiled sadly. "Probably a few years ago, when they were preparing for the anniversary." "You see," Steve noted, "this distance grew gradually." Of course, this did not make the betrayal any less painful, but Mark began to understand that a silent cooling reigned in their marriage. He, too, to some extent gave up, stopped trying to bring romance, took stability for granted. And here is the result. Ashley succumbed to feelings for another man, albeit destructive ones. One day, after a particularly emotional session where they discussed why Ashley had not shared her doubts with Mark, when she felt their marriage was slipping into a rut, she burst into tears in the office. Mark saw how hard she was enduring this soul-searching, and he involuntarily felt sorry for her. He moved closer and timidly touched her shoulder. "Hey, that's enough," he said hesitantly. "It's already passed. The main thing is that we are now trying to understand everything together." She shuddered, blinking away tears, and looked at him with gratitude. This gesture of reconciliation, although it did not erase the past, became the first step towards new intimacy. While they were going to couples therapy, another problem was brewing: money. Leaving the company left Ashley with no income. Mark, of course, continued to work and earned good money, but they had mortgage obligations until the recent registration of the house, Although Mark was now listed as the main owner, some payments still remained for the re-registration, and just living together on one salary has become unusual. In addition, when the question arose about Ashley looking for a new job, it turned out that her reputation in architectural circles was greatly damaged. The city is not that big, rumors spread quickly. Several bureaus to which she sent her resume politely refused. Two potential employers made no secret of the fact that they did not want an employee involved in a high-profile scandal. You understand that in our business reputation means a lot, one of the HR managers told her during an interview. We cannot afford negative PR. Ashley walked out of that interview feeling like she had been slapped in the face. Resentment towards myself bubbled in my soul. This is what the affair with the boss led to. Now I'm persona non grata. She tried to talk to Mark. If I can't return to architecture, I'll have to retrain or look for something radically different. Mark nodded, trying not to show unnecessary emotions. In the depths of his soul, he thought, this, in general, is a natural retribution for deception. But seeing how she was suffering, he did not want to finish her off with his reproaches. Perhaps you can find remote work, he suggested. Design projects on the internet, or freelancing. Yes, I'll think about it, she answered weakly. One day, Ashley risked opening her laptop to check if there were any orders on specialized freelance platforms. But I came across comments like, experience of working in a toxic bureau, or even someone, having learned her name, asked in personal messages, are you the one who slept with the boss? After that, she felt so disgusted that she closed her laptop and went into another room. Mark stood at the door and heard her sobs. He partly felt a pang of conscience. Perhaps airing her dirty linen in public could aggravate her image disaster. But then this was the only way to find out the truth. He understood that the situation was a dead end. She was to blame, but she was his wife, and he was still trying to save the marriage. He couldn't rejoice at her fall. As a result, after several more weeks of fruitless searches, she got a part-time job in a small company engaged in the interior design of private cottages. They hired her there, turning a blind eye to the scandals, but the salary was very modest. Ashley agreed so as not to sit idle, and yet they hinted to her that if reputational risks surfaced, she could lose this place too. About 3 months have passed since the start of family therapy. Mark and Ashley continued to visit Steve Garner once a week. During this time, some changes occurred in their relationship. They started talking more. Previously, every evening passed in silence or terse phrases, but now Mark tried to ask how the day went, and Ashley shared her job search, thoughts, and experiences. They talked about common memories, trying to find something that unites them. Physical distance has decreased. After a month of therapy, Mark began sleeping in their shared bedroom again. At first, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, but gradually they got used to each other's presence. Intimacy did not return soon, but at least hugs in the morning or touches began to appear again. The topic of betrayal is no longer taboo. Previously, Mark could not talk about this without outbursts of anger. Now, thanks to the support of a psychologist, he has learned to express pain in words, without becoming hysterical or insulting. Ashley, for her part, answered as honestly as possible when he asked questions. What did you feel about Charlie? Why didn't you stop? These conversations hurt both of them, but they helped remove the veneer of secrecy. Ashley's parents left, but left her with a message. Before leaving, the father said that, despite the great disappointment, he wanted them both to improve their relationship, if such a possibility existed. Mark felt that the grandparents of potential grandchildren did not want to lose their son-in-law. All this created the basis for the restoration of the marriage. But the main problem remained a crack in trust. Mark, although he made an effort, still harbored the fear inside that Ashley might deceive him again if new problems arose in their lives. The family psychologist helped them enter into a kind of contract of openness, agree that if one of them has doubts in a future relationship, dissatisfaction, or new attachment, they immediately discuss it with each other and do not go into secret correspondence or meetings. If you want to save your union, Steve said, You need to show each other that you are safe to admit any feelings. It was difficult. Mark often caught himself thinking that at the slightest reason he began to be jealous. But with the help of exercises given by the psychologist, he learned to check the facts and not just give in to fears. One day, when Ashley's phone rang late at night, he felt an internal spasm. What if it was someone like Charlie? But it turned out that it was a client from her new company who asked to make changes to the project. As the weeks passed, little by little a feeling of closeness began to return to their home. The two of them decided to rearrange the living room and bought a new sofa. While sorting through old things, we came across a box of photographs from the first years of marriage. Squatting next to each other, they looked together at smiling photographs from travels and parties with friends. I really want to go back to that time, Mark said, turning the photo over. We were young, in love, and believed that no troubles would touch our home. I want it too, Ashley whispered. I'm ready to fight for this as long as I have at least a small chance. He looked at her. Warm sadness shone in her eyes. He could not forget the betrayal, but he felt that she sincerely regretted what she had done and was trying to move forward. By the summer, the scandal in the city had subsided. Charlie, according to recent rumors, was trying to get a job somewhere, but his reputation was tarnished. Moreover, the trial for divorce from Caroline ended disastrously for him. He was left without part of the property and paid substantial alimony for 2 children. One day, Ashley heard that he had moved to another state, trying to rebuild his life there from scratch. She had no desire to contact him. She even changed her phone number to stop any possible attempts at communication. Mark, although he sometimes felt flashes of jealousy and anxiety, understood that Charlie had completely fallen out of their circle. Well, maybe it's for the best. One evening, the two of them were sitting by the fireplace. The fire crackled, softly lighting the room. Ashley made a cup of cocoa, handed it to Mark, and he thanked him and took a sip. You know, she said quietly, I was thinking about taking up architecture again more seriously. Maybe I'll try to open a small office at home and take on individual projects. I may not have a name yet, but I'm ready to work with private owners. Mark nodded. That's not a bad idea. If this is important to you, go for it. I can help with documentation. I know good accountants. She smiled. I will be grateful. And I want to say that I am happy that we are still together, that you gave me a chance. He sighed, feeling a mixed feeling of joy and pain rise in his chest. I'm also glad that we didn't give up. If we had divorced in a fit of resentment, we would never have known whether we could become stronger. I'm still learning to trust again, but now I feel like we have a future. Ashley smiled through wet eyes. I won't say platitudes that everything will be perfect. But at least I know that this time I will make every effort to prevent lies and betrayal. Mark paused, then moved forward and hugged her. For the first time in a long time, this gesture seemed natural and pleasant to him. He inhaled the scent of her hair and felt his own heart clench with a warm feeling for her, albeit wounded, but still alive. That night they sat for a long time by the fireplace, recalling funny incidents from the past, discussing vacation plans, and cautiously looking into the future. Yes, their relationship will never be the same as before, because the betrayal left a mark. But as the psychologist said, sometimes through a crisis people reach deeper mutual understanding. A few more months passed, and one could say that their marriage was slowly but surely recovering. Of course, they continued to visit Steve and encountered conflicts from time to time. But now they have learned to talk to each other openly without hushing up problems. Neighbors and friends who once considered them the perfect couple began to notice that laughter could be heard again in their house, albeit not as light-hearted as before, but more conscious. Mark began planning for the future with Ashley again. They decided to wait a couple of years before thinking about children, but at least they did not discard the thought. Every day is a chance to build a new chapter, Mark thought one day as he watched Ashley chat on the phone with a client, animatedly discussing his living room design. He felt that they had gone through the most difficult test, and now whatever they were able to revive would be built on more mature foundations. Yes, some scars will remain forever. But these scars form the pattern of their future history, maybe not a fabulously cloudless one, but a real one, with its own mistakes, pain, forgiveness, and, most importantly, the belief that sometimes it is worth going across the abyss if there is a chance to return true love. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.